Now, one of the first migrants to be deported under the controversial one-in, one-out scheme has returned to the UK, as we've been hearing, in another small boat, raising questions about the entire integrity of the government's returns deal with France.
Minister for Children, Josh MacAlister, joins us now. Minister, it's the story that's on nearly all of the front pages this morning, so we will talk about that in a moment. But first, you're out to discuss breakfast clubs this morning, aren't you? What's new and why will this work?
Yeah, thank you, and great to be with you. The government has already launched 750 new breakfast clubs. There's a further 2,000 that will be starting in April next year. And for the first wave, today, we're announcing a partnership with Weetabix, Morrison's, Sainsbury's and Magic Breakfast to make sure the pound that we're putting into this scheme goes even further so that schools can get discounts and also support with some of the practical things that we've learned through the test and learn phase. So, for example, primary schools in rural locations will be able to get free deliveries from Morrison's. This is British business stepping up to support a scheme which helps with getting kids into school, so it's good for attendance. It's really good for attainment, so improves reading, writing and maths. And finally, it's really practical help for families. The maximum amount of support it will mean for families is £450 extra in their pocket.
You make a very good case for it. It sounds pretty much unarguable, but the problem is that, I mean, there are tens of thousands of primary schools in this country, and this is only going to be rolled out in, what, about 700?
It's starting in the first 750, and we're rolling out free breakfast clubs to all primary schools over the Parliament. We're starting with 750. Okay. We've got a further 2,000 to come in April, and there'll be more to come following that. So we're building it out so that we learn from the initial phase, agree partnerships like this with Morrison's and Sainsbury's and Weetabix. And the early signs are that this is really successful. Parents really value and appreciate it. And it's good for getting kids into school early, ready to learn and attaining even better.
Well, talking of learning from things, dear, the headlines are not great for the government this morning, are they? 60,000 small boat arrivals since Labour took power, already more than the whole of last year so far this year. And extraordinarily, one person on one of those boat arrivals has already been here before on a small boat, been sent back on the one-in, one-out scheme. People will just raise their hands above their heads and say, what are we going to do?
Well, in one sense, I'm really pleased you've drawn attention to this. So this guy who paid a gang to come here illegally was identified. His biometric details were taken. He was detained, and he was one, as you say, one of the first to be returned to France under the agreement. Now, he has tried to do the same thing again. He's paid a gang again. He's crossed again. We've detained him immediately because we've got the biometric details, and he will be returned to France. People need to know, if you cross the channel, if you pay a gang to do that, that is illegal, it's not allowed, and we will return you to France. Okay. And that is what we're doing with this gentleman.
You're saying it... Sorry, this is pretty good spinning. Are you saying it was a good day for the one-in, one-out scheme yesterday?
Well, I think it shows the scheme is working if people who come here, having been returned, are also going to be returned again. And look, the scheme is still in its pilot phase. So if you look at the other place in the world that we've taken inspiration for this scheme from, which is the US-Mexico border, they did a very similar thing. They set up a returns agreement for illegal and irregular crossings. It was small scale at first. That didn't have an effect on the business model because it wasn't scaled up. But once it was proven, it was then scaled up, and that was the single biggest thing that has drastically cut the number of illegal crossings from Mexico into the US, and that's the model we're using here with the channel.
So you think the headlines this morning, I mean, front page of the Mail, Le Farce, The Sun, Come Again, The Express, one in, one out and back again, you think they're all wrong? It should have been something like another good day for the one-in, one-out scheme.
No, of course I don't. But the scheme is working if people who've come here illegally and been returned to France then try and do it again. This guy's used his money to do this. He's being returned again, and that's quite right, and that will happen. So if he comes again, he'll be returned again, and we want that message to go out to people that are considering making the crossing, that if they try to cross, they will be returned. If that's happened, they'll be returned again. And of course, the government isn't satisfied with the overall numbers. We've come in at a time when we had an enormous asylum backlog of nearly 100,000. That's led to all these hotels. We've got a terrible system of right-to-work checks. We're fixing that, both with the rollout of digital ID that will come very soon, and also with the enforcement action that we're taking. And we're also signing new partnerships with countries like Germany. There was National Crime Agency action in Bulgaria last week. So no one thing is going to sort this problem, but the government is earnestly, seriously and determinedly focused on sorting this issue. And we are not satisfied with the total numbers. Of course we're not.
So there was
but on
much
this specific example,
wasn't there, when this scheme was you know, flagged and there was a deal in place with France? I suppose, you know, I can see that you're arguing that the biometrics worse and this person was picked up, which is a good start, and is going to be definitely sent back. But the numbers are just getting bigger and bigger. So how long do we have to wait, and how frustrated do you think people are going to be before that deterrent kicks in?
Yeah, look, I get that people are really frustrated about this issue. There's been so much noise made about it, particularly by politicians, and the situation hasn't improved. So people rightly are holding me and politicians to account for fixing it. That's what we're determined to do. We're not happy with this. We're dissatisfied and frustrated, and we are disrupting the system of crossings and gangs to make sure that these numbers come down. That's what the new Home Secretary is totally focused on. And I think she's written even this morning saying that we're going to speed up all of these things. Interestingly, I think this guy who crossed again has claimed that there's some exploitation that he's experienced in France. Yes. We're really clear that that is not a justification to come to the UK, because he will have paid a gang to cross again. So we're toughening up the rules on this so that they've got backing from the public here, and so that they're common sense, so that ultimately we can bring these numbers down.
As we were discussing on this programme earlier, and I'm sure many other media outlets have been discussing today, there is a general sense of growing disbelief in this country that a large, powerful institution that's called the British government and another large and powerful institution called the French government can't sort out a few rogue gangs on the northern fringe of France. Now, this has been going on now for year after year after year, and as you say, Kate, the problem is getting bigger, not smaller. Why can't we reach a definitive deal with France to properly mop up these criminals who are running these boats across the Channel?
Well, one of the issues here is major global trends on the movement of people. That's affecting countries all around the world. What we're trying to do is disrupt our own systems here in the UK. So we've scrapped a number of schemes that were gimmicks by the previous government. We've put extra resource in to clear through the backlog. We're changing our laws here and our interpretation of the ECHR.
The gangs on the northern coast of France are running rings around the French and, by default, around us, aren't they? They're in charge.
They are at the moment, and what we are trying to do through the returns agreement is break the fundamental model that is driving all of this. That is what has happened at the US border with Mexico. So if you look at the statistics, and I'd encourage people to go away and Google this or look at it on social media, the initial pilots didn't change the behaviour because they weren't at the scale big enough to change the chances of somebody making an illegal crossing being detained and returned. Once the pilot was shown to work and it scaled up, it completely changes the dynamics. So if we can scale up the scheme, people in France that are thinking about crossing and parting with their cash to have a gang ferry them over, if they know that there is a very good chance that they'll be returned to the UK, they won't be paying gangs and the business model goes bust. That's why we're putting so much effort into making sure the scheme as a pilot succeeds, and we want to scale it up as soon as possible. It's not the only thing that we're doing, but Richard, you are right to say, and the public are right to feel, massive frustration at this. We are a new government, we've come in, we're not satisfied with the status quo. We want to shake things up. That's what I'm doing as the Children's Minister, it's what my colleagues are doing across government, and we're very, very keen to do that as soon as possible.
Another story on the front pages today, and something that's been boiling all week, actually, is this inquiry into grooming. As you know, the calls were loud and hard from survivors at the beginning of the year. It was really 6 months for the government to agree to go ahead, and now We're not even at the point of starting, and there is chaos, including 4 survivors stepping back from it because they say they're just not being heard. Do you have a concern about Jess Phillips staying in place? Because they say they won't come back to the panel unless she's gone.
What's going on here, and it's, I think, completely understandable and valid, is the survivor community have got some different views amongst them about the person who should be the chair, about the scope of the inquiry, and about some of the timings. And I don't want to disrespect or invalidate any of those different views. They're totally right to have the views that they've got, and they're expressing them. The job of government is to consider all those different opinions, weigh them up, and then make some decisions. And Jess is right at the heart of that process as somebody who, for her entire career, has been focused on supporting victims of abuse. And I can't think of many other people in Parliament who could do the job that she's doing, the engaging that she's done. The Prime Minister, the Home Secretary have confidence in her. She's a colleague who is absolutely determined to get this right. But I do know that people will look at this and think, you know, why can't we get this done? I would point out that the independent inquiry into sexual abuse that was set up by the last government, it took them 3 times to get the right chair before they landed on Baroness J. We obviously don't want to go through that. We want to get it right the first time, and that means it's just going to take a little bit longer. I don't know whether you've spoken to Jim Gamble this morning, but I know he's been doing interviews. I know Jim. Right, so I know Jim, he's very good, he's very experienced, and I think it's a shame that he's withdrawn from the process. And he's cited a political game playing by other political parties for the reason for him doing that. And that is a real frustration, I feel, because as a government minister at the Department for Education with responsibility for child protection, we are putting through Parliament mandatory reporting. We're changing the child protection system so we put police officers and social workers in the same team. Okay. And we're introducing the single unique identifier. All of these are measures that have been frustrated and with attempted sabotage from Reform and the Conservatives in Parliament. They're not really interested in sorting this issue out. They're interested in making noise about it, and that is, I think, really unfortunate. OK, we have to end it there, but what you're effectively saying is that despite this ultimatum from those 4 survivors, Jess Phillips clearly firmly remains in post. Thank you for making that clear, and thank you for joining us this morning.